The following episode contains subject matter and content not suitable for younger audiences, and we recommend not listening in the presence of children, unless you want to answer a lot of questions. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 13 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast. This one is a little bit of a bonus episode. With the other two seasons, we've done 12, but we figured we'd add a little extra in here for you, and so we thought we'd make it a good one.
Oh, yeah.
So the title of this episode is, Why is it so hard to talk about sex? So we're talking all about sex.
All about the sexy time today, everybody. It's kind of a rite of passage as like a marriage podcast. You got to have at least one episode dedicated to all the good stuff.
Okay, so if the topic of this episode is making you a little uncomfortable, just know that you're in good company because I'm already feeling a little bit uncomfortable.
It's a little awkward talking about it in general. And, you know, go figure, we've never really recorded or published these conversations for someone else before. So we hope that you have a good time listening to us try to navigate what I think was implicitly just a challenging conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole
But
point
we're
of
going to have fun with this.
The whole point of this is to, engage in conversations in a thoughtful way to address the hard things, the important things, the real things.
Are we going to laugh every time you say something like address the hard things?
But nothing we discuss in this conversation is going to be like super personal or super risky. Risque.
Yeah. A little personal and risque.
But not too personal.
We're not going to get
risky.
explicit. Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure our parents listen to our content. So,
right.
I mean, there's that. But believe it or not, we're kind of rather prude, the two of us. So, but to ignore...
Speak for yourself.
To ignore sex in marriage isn't really doing anyone any good or any marriage any good. And so part of this is important. I mean, all of it is important. So, if this isn't something that you're comfortable with, I think that's kind of good. And maybe it's even more the reason to listen to the rest of the episode.
Right.
So let's talk about it. Why, Jordan, is it hard to talk about sex?
Originally we were going to do it like a combo. Like we're going to try to talk about sex and money. So eventually we'll talk about money because that's another topic that just becomes very dicey for couples. And I think for the same reason, and that is that like there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot at stake in those conversations, and it's difficult to talk about because like there's so many like perceptions and maybe like misconceptions that we have related to like what we feel like is appropriate or what we value about it, and it's just awkward too. You don't talk about those things in public, right? In polite conversation, they just don't come up. So typically you're not hearing your parents talk about those things. You're not really hearing your friends talk about those things. So when it's finally your turn to talk about that with your spouse and you bring all this baggage to it and no experience, it's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, and I would agree. Like, if you think about all of the negative messages that most of us receive when we're young about sex, like, and mostly like, that sex is wrong, no sex before me, like all of that, right? So you get this, like, you're not supposed to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden it's like, we get married, right? We were pretty young, 23. It was like, keep your hands off each other, no sex until marriage. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you get married and now you can have sex, but like no one's really talked to you about it and what those expectations for sex in marriage look like, right, and what they are and what's healthy and what's unhealthy. And then you're kind of just thrown into this ocean of trying to navigate it without really having any insight as to like what is healthy, what's normal, and who else is talking about these things with you? Mm-hmm. Nobody.
Right.
So I just feel like in our society, it's just not an acceptable topic of conversation, right? Like you wouldn't have a bunch of friends over and then start talking personally about your sex life.
Maybe some people do. That hasn't come up in our typical conversations with people that we're close with. Maybe it should, though. But I always remember, like, just even looking back at some of the conversations, like we've tried to have. I think there's a degree of selfishness that kind of goes into it as well, because you're talking about what you need or what you want or what you like, and sometimes that just by itself can be difficult to articulate, but now it's something that you can't access without that other person, and it becomes difficult if they're having trouble communicating what they want and they have different needs and wants and preferences.
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back to kind of, expectations and wants and needs. But that's, part of why we're talking about this, like if we're silent about it, it keeps us not in a good place. And so it's all about like communicating. And so, that's kind of like that next part of this is like, why should we talk about sex? And according to marriage experts, sex matters a lot, but maybe not just for the reasons we think it does.
I don't need an expert to tell me that.
Well, you don't, but somebody might.
Okay.
Right? It matters, right? Like we don't, that's part of the beauty of being married. Like there's a lot of great things about being married, but like sex is a part of that. And so if sex isn't a part of the equation, like the marriage isn't going to be balanced and healthy in a way that it needs to be.
Yeah.
Research has found that couples who have strong sexual communication are more satisfied with their sex lives. And open communication can lead to greater feelings of intimacy, a stronger relationship. And there's a lot of reasons that you should be talking about sex with your partner, and it's not just like because you're unsatisfied. There are just many aspects that we should be talking about.
Right. So I'm looking forward to talking about some of those with you. But you're not just talking about the act, but the communication surrounding the act.
So some of the reasons to have a talk about sex with your partner could include, a lack of sexual satisfaction or a desire to try something new. Even just like changes that happen like naturally, like in your body with your libido or changes after like having a baby, like being able to communicate those things can give your partner insight as to why things have changed or why you want them to change or why you are uncomfortable or things like that, that can give somebody else some insight and kind of help you through times of kind of change. But there's, if there's a lack of intimacy or a need for more affection, or if you're feeling sexually rejected, or you feel like you always have to initiate, or even talking about like family planning and kids and what's next, like that's all a part of, conversations like regarding sex.
Yeah.
And so all of those things, need to be talked about and addressed, but it can be kind of awkward to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So, part of it is like, how do you and when do you talk about sex?
Right.
Any insights for our listeners on that?
Well, I feel like this is an area we can improve on. Like, I think that's part of what we're going to talk about today is just how to improve upon that for ourselves. So, I mean, listeners should know this is probably, of all of the many great conversations that you and I have, like this is, I would say, probably not one of them.
No, because I think for that same reason that it's like awkward, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think there are some general tips about like how to approach the subject and when to approach the subject,
Sure.
right? There's like a time
Just
and
the
a
tip.
place, right? Waiting for the right moment to address the topic can help you get around some of those feelings of discomfort or awkwardness that can be common around sex talks. So you should probably like pick like a neutral location, right?
Let's drive separately to Starbucks and let's meet.
Just neutral, like not in the bedroom.
Okay.
Not in the bedroom at bedtime, right? Or not, right after a sexual encounter. Also not the best time. Like, I didn't really like, we have to.
It's like when you're eating somebody's meal and it's like, this is
what this
okay, but
needs?
yeah.
I think it needs a little more garlic and a little more. So you're not there to like critique it, right? And you also don't want to blindside your partner with the topic. Like if you want to talk about sex or things in the bedroom or even problems, right? Like you need to let your partner know, like that you want to have this conversation so that they're not blindsided and then they're kind of like, okay, what is it that he or she wants to talk about? Like, yeah, I guess I have some things that I'd want to bring up too. So it's like the wheels are already in motion and people are already starting to kind of like assess and self-assess maybe where this conversation is going.
But I think it's good if before we talk, let's just acknowledge the awkwardness and just say, look, like I want to talk about this. I already feel awkward about it and I know you do too, but can we talk about this now or can we like find a time to do that? So if you acknowledge that awkwardness, then you can both kind of like giggle and squirm during the conversation, but get out what you need to.
Oh yeah, when you like bring that up with me, I like literally want to run and hide. Because I act like such a prude and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is he going to say? Oh my gosh, I don't want to hear it. Like
even just anything. If I just say, Rosanna, can we talk? And I haven't even identified
I'm like
the
worst
topic.
case scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully it's not about money or about sex because I don't want to hear about either. But they, experts will say have like a soft start to the conversation. Begin with your goal to feel
A little foreplay to get into.
No.
the
Begin
conversation.
with your goal to feel closer and connected with your spouse. Avoid blaming, skip criticisms, and focus on the things you can both do to make your sex life more fulfilling.
Yeah.
So it's not a way to shame someone or to look for fault or place blame or anything like that. It's like, I want to be closer to you, like for our marriage, for our relationship.
Yeah. Actually, I read similar advice too, and I'll try to put that into practice during this conversation. But it said focus on what you want or what your needs are without laying blame. So without saying you don't do this, you don't do that. Okay, so to help Rosanna and I actually have a productive sex-oriented conversation, I made a little questionnaire for us. And there's actually a lot of interesting questionnaires online that
And by
we took together.
interesting, he means like what I would call like completely obscene and rather ridiculous.
Yeah, it ranged from like, yes, I'm interested in this, all the way to, wow, that's a thing. So we made our own questionnaire. That's, I think, a little bit more based, not just about sex, but kind of just about the whole relationship and everything. So we answered these questions separately earlier today. And for the first time right now, we're going to share our answers to these questions, really just as a gateway into what I hope is a broader conversation about sex for us.
So we're doing it. The questionnaire.
You know, we should have done a lot more research for this show.
We can do some research later.
Okay, so should I just share what all the
share
questions are first, or should we just go through
Let's
them
just
one
go
by
one
one?
by one.
Okay. All right, so first question. So this is same questions, but we answer them separately, so we'll see if they compare. All right, so the first question is, what do you think you do that turns on your spouse? So I'll write down what I did that I think turns you on. I wrote down, clean something. How am I doing?
Okay, so that question is, what does your spouse do that turns you on? And I wrote, takes out the garbage and replaces the bag.
Yeah, I don't know why that's a thing for you.
That's a thing for me.
I'll take out the garbage every day if that helps.
Well, I mean, it used to be like right when we were like kids, it's something different. But now it's like when you do these things that like you generally don't do or aren't good at doing, and then you do them for me, I'm like major spoon. And I was like,
Okay.
oh yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure why that is what comes to mind in
don't
that
know.
description.
But
Right.
that's-
So, but I said clean something because I feel like your connection and your contentedness with your environment makes you feel more at ease.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this in other episodes about like personality and all of that. It's like when things in my domain, which are like in the house, are like taken care of, so things are clean and organized and put away and all as it should be, I feel like I can relax.
Mm-hmm.
And when things are not like that, like I feel like I'm preoccupied, and so then I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking about all the things that need to be done or how they need to be done, and like I don't turn off, which means I don't relax, which means then it's hard for me to be turned on.
Right.
In that way, because
Right.
it kind of interferes.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree, like, yeah, clean something or help take care of something.
Okay.
So if I asked you the question, what do you think I do that turns you on? Mm-hmm. Okay,
So what turns me on, Roseanne?
just me simply existing turns you on. And if I occasionally bend over to unload the dishwasher or like make a note on something, you're ready to go.
Yep. Doesn't take much, people. So I also made a list that answers that question from my end.
Okay.
So first of all, I wrote down that it would probably be easier to write down what doesn't than what does. But then I did make like a more practical list. Some of the items may shock you. So the first one is bend over the dishwasher.
Was it really?
Or the counter.
Right, the counter.
Yeah. Then some of these are, I think, relatively predictable, like wearing something appealing. And there's various levels of that. Like sometimes it's like a nice dress when we're about to go out. Sometimes it's much less. Oh, so along those lines, just when you're like done up, like hair and makeup, very tantalizing, titillating. When you say something, even if it's like over text, like just something alluring, something a little bit out of character, is a big turn on.
Something other than, can you pick up the kids from soccer?
Well, I mean, so much of just the generic
Right.
household conversations. Kissing, also. But then there's a few that might surprise you. I find intelligence really attractive. So, like when you're reading, And not like your kind of like your pop fiction kind of things, but when you're like reading to learn, I don't know, I find that kind of sexy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And also like competence as well. So like you're running your business, and like just as I see that like build and thrive, I'm like, hello.
All right.
All right. And also when we're out together in public, like seeing you interact with other people also.
But what about that
Because
is?
that's when you're at your glowiest.
Oh, okay. So something about just my aura with other people draws you in.
Right, just like watching you laugh and smile, watching you like interact and crack jokes, and just be as personable as you really are. It's fun.
I would agree.
It's
I
fun to
think,
see you kind of like in your element.
and we don't really see each other like at work, and so like when we go to work functions for you, and people are there, and I don't really know people, but they all know you, and then they're like talking about you, and like when they like say like what a great guy you are, or like when they start like kind of singing your praises and your accolades, like I mean that does it for me too, where it's like I'm glad other people see what I see. Because, sometimes, like, with your friends and your family, they don't necessarily see you the same way that, like, outsiders see you.
Right.
And so when I get, like, told back to me, like, what I see in you, but other people experience it, I'm always, like, super proud and kind of like, yeah, I'm taking that home later.
Okay. It doesn't cross my mind that you have those kinds of thoughts. Okay. What are two?
Wait, you just got really shy. Like, you could say all those things to me. I said that about you, and you're like, okay, next
It just surprises
question.
me. It just surprises me because you don't say that out loud that often. So to hear you say it now, it's kind of like, I didn't see that coming.
Oh, all right.
All right. So what are two things that turn you off? You go first.
Oh, bad breath and poor hygiene turned me off.
Oh, okay.
Big time.
So how would you rate my general breath and hygiene?
Oh, if it's like right before bed, you're usually pretty good to go. Other random times where, what do we call it when you're on summer vacation over the summers and you're not working?
Summer hygiene?
Summer hygiene, where you shave like once a week, and it's like questionable whether you've like brushed your hair or are wearing the same shirt 4 days in a row.
All right, so just general preparation of the self.
Preparation of the self.
Yeah. All right, so I wrote down two turnoffs as well. I do have them. I know it may shock you. The first is what I call management discussions.
Oh boy.
All right, so let's say like, we're getting intimate, and then you kind of just throw something into the mix like, I signed Juliet up for gymnastics today. Like, what is that totally, like, what that doesn't need to be brought up at that time. Or remind me later, I need to like go like complete this thing online. It's like, slow down. Because I could tell your mind then it's still like processing something totally different. Or even if I may be so bold as to say, like sometimes you start talking logistics, like, okay, first I'm going to pull my pants down over here.
Oh, come on, stop it.
Like sometimes you just verbalize those things out loud. I'm like, I don't know if we need a script right now. All right, so that's one thing. The other turnoff I would say is self put downs, which you do. So I might say something like, Roseanne, you look so good right now. And what do you say?
Ew.
Ew. Oh my gosh, I'm so fat. I'm so ugly. And then it puts me in the position of having to be like, no, you're not, Rosanna. Actually, you're really attractive, right? And then I feel like I have to like build you. It kind of just it kills the vibe.
Okay. Super embarrassing to talk about this on the podcast.
Sure.
For you to reiterate those things publicly. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Do I have to, what, am I answering something?
The next question.
Which are what? Two things that turn me on?
Yes.
Smells turn me on.
Smells.
Yeah. Like you have really expensive cologne that you rarely wear.
It's for special occasions.
It's for daily. Like that's why I bought. It's not supposed to last 15 years. Like
okay.
So smells turn me on. Like the smell of something.
Question: like if I put it on before I go to work, then I'm just out of the house all day. You don't really get to smell it then. Should I put it on when I come home?
No, but like then I smell you before you leave, and you smell good when you come home. It's not like it like disappears from you. Like you have a scent, and like I like that. Like
okay.
I want you to smell like we just smell like clean people. Like right, like fabric softener. Right. One of my friends' kids always says, "Oh, were Juliet and Rosanna here? Why I can smell them. Like like we have the scent of clean clothes, but like I don't want you to smell like laundered clothes. Like okay. I want you to smell like a hot man that I want to put my hands on.
All right, I'll increase the cologne usage.
Okay. What else turns me on? Two things turn you on. Smells. And I feel like moods. I feel like
like mood lighting and
yeah, like setting a mood is important.
candles and yeah.
And we don't really do that.
Okay.
But I think that would like kind of add to some ambiance and maybe get me to be out of that mentality of like thinking about the next thing and kind of get me to like.
Okay. All right. I have a question later on that I'll ask you to build off of.
All right.
Okay. What is your ideal frequency of sex per week? Should we say our answers on the count of three?
Sure.
One, two, three.
4.
4. All right. So I said 4.
I said 2.
Yeah.
And I would say we're generally where?
1 or 2.
I was going to say 2 or 3.
Well, yeah, I would. So anyway, let's go for that 4.
Okay.
All right, I have another question in our lightning round that will build off of that.
Lightning round. I did not even know.
All right, preferred time of day.
Oh, for me, it would be like midday.
Midday.
And I'll tell you why. In the morning, no thank you. I'm like not really interested. There's kids. Ours are always up early. Like, no. Like, I'd want it to be like a private thing. I feel like whatever. So mornings are not good. I don't really like anything in the morning besides coffee. That's like the only thing I want in the morning. And by the time like at night, all the kids are in bed and everything is done, whatever, like I'm just too tired. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of times on the weekends, we find a midday excuse to have a meeting upstairs. Mm-hmm. And that really seems to work.
It works, but I wrote down, first of all, I wrote down anytime I can get it. That's my answer. But I actually wrote down night as a preferred time. So I agree. Like we're often like really too tired to have an engaging time together. So if I would change anything, it would just be like my energy level or so. So in an ideal world, it would be night. Midday is good as well, except that I feel like, at that time, especially if like the kids are around, I mean, it's just...
Yeah, right.
It's just...
It's kind of like recording
awkward,
the podcast. Yeah. Your fingers are crossed and no one's going to interrupt or try and knock on the door.
Right. Okay.
Energy level of day, but privacy of night would be great.
There you go. If anybody wants to watch the kids for an hour or so on a typical Saturday
maybe like
or Sunday,
a 1-week vacation, like that would help, just no one there.
Okay, I threw this into our questionnaire because this is, I think, just important to define. So when you think of the word intimacy, what does that suggest to you? It's open-ended.
I mean,
when you think of like a genuinely intimate relationship.
One that's close, one that's honest, one that's real, in sync, one that includes like laughing, no shame.
Oh, you're going way out there. I wrote down sex. That's if you're intimate, if we're having sex.
Well, being intimate, having an intimate relationship, it's all of those things, being vulnerable.
Well, I did write and stuff with that.
Okay. Well, I mean, think about it. Like, in order to be intimate with someone, right? Like, you have to, like, be vulnerable, right? You have to, like, want to take off your clothes in front of someone and not just jump under the covers and close the light so they can't see you, right? Like, so, like, you have to have that, like, honesty, that security, right? Like, I wouldn't do that with anybody, anywhere, anytime, that it's just this very close thing.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so maybe I can work on improving my conception of intimacy.
Right, like you're thinking of just like jump into bed and like go, where I'm like, talk to me, tell me I'm pretty.
Right.
All of that.
What is one thing your partner, that's you, what is one thing Rosanna can improve upon with her approach to sex? You and I wrote.
Do I want to know? I get worried anytime you ask it in a question form. I feel like I'm in trouble.
I wrote communication.
Okay.
So, and at times I feel like I've tried to bring something up, and again, I'm not that like savvy with how I'm broaching it, but I could see you almost like physically like recoil. And then you just like, okay, no, So
if you're listening to this as a podcast and not watching the YouTube video, you'd understand why I'm laughing. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I feel like we both can improve in that area, but that's one answer to that question. So maybe one challenge for you and for both of us in that.
Okay. If I'm answering the same question, what is one thing your partner can prove upon with their approach to sex? And mine was similar. I didn't say communication. I actually wrote like two things that said ask for it and plan on it, which have to do with communication. Because I think it was last year I had set one of my resolutions or goals had to do with like our relationship, our intimate relationship, right? And in my mind, it was like, if I wanted to show you that I loved you more, I would do X or include, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And like there was like a goal with it. So it was like something that I could like strive for, like reach, right? Like
You could know if you were achieving that or not.
correct. And I think that that's like important. So if like after this conversation, like the goal is to be having sex 3 times a week, like, right? Like then like that's on my mind when I go to sleep at night. And right, like I'm like, it's Thursday and I'm thinking, oh crap, it hasn't happened once. Like I gotta power up.
We should
this
probably
weekend.
play it safe. We should probably go for 6, and then in
Right.
case you don't meet that goal, then
Right,
you're still
3
at 3.
sounds good.
Right.
So, but I think that's part of it is like, and I'll say this about you, like you're never one to like ask for it. I always feel like I have to like offer it.
Right.
And so if I don't offer it, you just kind of look at me like the dog looks at me when she wants to go for a walk.
All right. Well, okay. So let's talk about this since this came up. I feel like it's difficult to initiate for a number of reasons. One is like I feel a little selfish. I feel like I'm more interested than you on any like typical night. But also kind of like I know we'll have a question that we'll get to, but like I just feel like the act of like trying to initiate is it's awkward. So I feel like there are just some of these barriers, and I grant like maybe some of them are artificial to like just kind of taking the lead with that as much as I should.
Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, and maybe this is just a perception thing. Like, I don't know that I would turn you down. Right. And this is, you had said like, do you have other questions? And so I put this one in there. It's like, do you know what maintenance sex is?
No.
Okay. So maintenance sex, they say that it's very important in a marriage. Okay. And it's one of you may not really be in the mood, but you do it anyways.
Okay.
And they often say that even if you're not in the mood and you're like, I really don't want to, but you do it for the sake of like the other person in your relationship. Oftentimes you kind of start off with, I'm not really in the mood. And then, like you're in it and you're like, okay, well, this really wasn't such a bad idea. So sometimes It's more of like that idea of like, yeah, right now I'd really just rather roll over and go to sleep, but I love you enough to know that like you need this and it's good for us. And I'm not going to come out like being like, well, I regretted that. Mm-hmm. But it's important in a marriage. And so sometimes like maybe that's how it starts, but that's not how it really ends. And so It's kind of this important part of like,
Well, sometimes I get that vibe too, and it's not as appealing either. It's like, well, okay, like I better do this before he gets mad or all backed up or something. And then if that's kind of the vibe going into it, it's like, you know what? Like I feel like you're just patronizing.
It's not always the vibe going into it, right? Like, do you do things around the house all of the time because you love me and you want to do them, or are you thinking if I do this, I'm totally getting laid later?
Well, I don't know. It's not
Yes,
not a guarantee. It's
not a guarantee, but you're like, well, if this ups my odds, I'm emptying the garbage and putting a bag back in. Is it not?
Yeah.
Okay, well. And like, there are times, sometimes I can, not that you're not always nice or that you're not always helpful. Like when you're like above and beyond, I was like, okay, he shall be rewarded later. Like, okay. Like, so it's kind of like in that same mindset, like. I
almost feel like a puppy. Like, oh, I get a treat later.
But I think sometimes, like, we put the kids to bed and it's late and we're both tired and like I'd rather go to sleep and you're kind of interested, right? Like, maybe not planning on it in advance, which, some people will be like, oh my gosh, that takes like the this out of it or the that out of it. But like having a plan for it, right? Like whether it's like on certain nights of the week or it's the frequency of how many times during the week. If there's like a plan, right? Like it's like everybody's kind of aware and is on board. And then if someone needs to communicate that like they want more or that although it's like we usually do, like I'm not feeling good tonight or I have a headache or like whatever it is, like so you can be honest. Everyone's like, okay, all right, well then we'll try again tomorrow. Right. So like having some kind of plan or some kind of something where you're not just like expecting it or talking about it like 2 seconds before someone wants to roll over and go to sleep, kind of puts everyone on the same page and everyone has like right expectations about it maybe.
Yeah. We need a code word.
Code word. All right, well, we'll develop that.
Biscuits. And I'm hungry for biscuits tonight.
Are you making biscuits for dinner?
Yes.
No, I'm not. All right, so do we move on to the next question?
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, rate your overall sexual satisfaction in this relationship. You go first.
Ah. Okay, I wrote down 7.
Okay. I wrote down 6.
Okay.
So that's a hard. Sometimes it's easier to communicate with numbers, so that's why I put that question in here.
Okay.
So overall, we're satisfied, but there's room for improvement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like you said 6, which is good because it says guess what your partner put for their rating.
Right. Yeah.
And I figured it was probably lower than that. So.
What number did you
5.
guess?
I figured you'd guessed 5.
Oh, okay. So you went low and hoping that I came in above that. No, I would say 6. And I'll get into some of the reasons for that, I think, a little bit later on. But yes, so overall, like, satisfied. But I also think that there is, especially since we're kind of like talking about how to talk about it better, like I think there's nowhere to go but up. No pun intended.
Okay. I know, but what 5 means to one person isn't what 5 means to another.
It's just a number. It's just a start. It's just a start.
Just
okay.
a start.
So we have a few other questions. Maybe can help us dissect that a little bit more.
Well, you don't want to talk about those numbers now?
Okay, go ahead.
Well, why did you put 6?
I put 6. I mean, I already told you, like, overall satisfied, but I feel like, for one, I feel like with some of the other questions, like there's, and actually I have a lightning round question I'll just mention now, which is that there's, I think, a slight disparity in our libidos.
100%.
So, I am, and I would also say this too, and I'm not speaking for all guys, but I think I might be close here. I would estimate about 75% of every day I spend thinking about sex.
Okay.
Which is actually, I must be getting older. It's down. I would probably say when I was younger, it was like, it had to have been in the 90s.
Okay.
So a lot of time and attention. I wonder what I could do if I were just like kind of like liberated from my interest in this, right? I could do so
you're a pretty
many more
high
things.
functioning, high achieving individual. So
Right.
like you're already like on the upper echelon of achievement. So like
Yeah.
if you weren't thinking about that 75% of the time, what would you be doing?
Right. And so I don't have any sort of like wild or peculiar interests or anything like that, but like a good percentage of my thinking is kind of directed towards this. So like that being said, I think the more that we talk about it, then the more we can just understand like those just needs and figure out how to best mutually meet them.
Okay. Okay.
And that's what some of these other questions are for.
Okay.
All right. So why'd you put a 7?
7 meaning that I would say that it's not like I want to do that with anybody else. Like you're my person. You're the person I want to do that with. When I'm with you, I have no complaints, right? But yeah, I feel like other things get in the way. And I feel like I wish I could be like more, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say like into it, because it's not that I'm not into it, but like I wish we didn't have to worry about kids or dogs or like, I wish we were just like on an island somewhere and I felt like less inhibition, that I wasn't like, I don't want to say that I'm tense, but like, you know what I mean? Like that I felt fully relaxed and I could like just be all in. But there's like part of you that's always like listening for, someone breathing at your door. That's all. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I guess that's why I would say 7. Like,
Okay.
it's good.
Yeah.
I wish some of the other stuff could go away.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. All right. This one I threw in for fun. Name 2 places outside of the bedroom where you'd be interested in making love.
I have no like major aspirations for like where or what those places are.
Oh, okay.
Like,
It's just for fun. Just
you did that like little survey, right? There was like a survey and it asked like a similar question. And I don't know if it like asked something specific, but I was like, I don't know, like a wooded area, like a forest preserve.
oh, gee.
Not like the one like that my dad is walking in or takes the dog to walk in like on a warm day. Nothing where like people would be, but like, like in the movies, they're like in an open field somewhere. Or
Right.
like they're on a secluded beach and no one's there.
Or like the waterfall. And,
right. Great. As long as no one's there. But like,
Okay.
we're not going to drive down the road and go to the forest preserve.
Okay,
here.
that's one. Did you have another one?
It was yes, it was like a beach and a forest preserve, like
Oh, okay.
naturey.
Oh, naturey.
Naturey.
Interesting. Okay, my two places, I'll just throw them out there, kitchen and car.
Not the Civic, right? I mean, that's
Or the van.
tiny.
The van,
Oh.
yeah.
Seats up or seats down?
Yeah.
I just want to know.
So kitchen. Don't worry, if we have any guests over, we'll close
Oh,
everything
gosh.
down before you swing by. Okay.
Do people do that?
Yeah. I'm sure they do.
Of course. Well, I don't know. I'm
Maybe
just
not.
assuming.
Yeah. So if you guys ever do that, just let us know.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just comment somewhere about interesting places.
Let's start the conversation.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
I wrote down, how can we improve our communication with one another? I think we're doing it now, but I think I would propose that since we're already like talking together every Monday night, that we just make like a designated portion of that conversation to be like the sort of open sex question communication time.
You know, that reminds me of the conversation we had with the regulars. You know, that they like everything is on the table.
They say
and there's,
that, yeah.
You know, and you know what time do you like it? And you know, I just thought that was interesting that they did not feel like embarrassed or ashamed to even talk about the fact that that's something that they talk about, because it's important in a healthy relationship to set expectations and to know what your partner likes and what they don't like and where and how and all of that. And those are healthy, normal things. And so I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from that conversation that has kind of trickled into this one. So that although this conversation may feel a little nerve-wracking, you know, that there's nothing wrong with this conversation.
Right.
In the confines of you and I are married and have been married for almost 15 years.
Yeah. All right. I want to skip to our last question. It says, what is best for your partner to do to initiate sex? You go first.
Well, and I had said this earlier, to set a mood.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that there's never a mood, but like dim a light, light a candle, find music that I like. Like, I don't even think you know what kind of music I like.
Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Right. And that's what you would probably put on, which would put me out of the mood. So
Okay.
like,
All right, yeah.
you know, I would even say like, you know, I know you said something about like what I wear and what that looks like. Like, I mean, in all honesty, when was the last time you bought me something you'd want to see me in?
I did, but then you never actually wore it. So then I'm like, it's probably not something that I should be doing.
But how long ago was that?
It was a while ago.
Right.
Right?
So
I got scared off.
okay, well, maybe it's time to
Okay.
try
All right,
again.
so that's what I put down for mine as well. So I wrote down the visual element. And I think as a man, it's like well documented. I'm a visual creature. So I think that if to whatever extent can be emphasized and capitalized on would be my recommendation.
Okay. And just so you all know, when I go to bed, I'm wearing like socks, sweatpants, like 3 layers of shirts tucked into my pants, tied shut.
Right.
With my hood up
right,
and a
we
blanket.
just look like, adults in whatever
Right.
comfy clothing we have. So I think that is something else that we can include.
Okay.
I also wrote this down for initiation. I wrote down longer foreplay.
Okay.
So you just kind of click, you're like, all right, noted, move on. Can I tell?
Yeah, but then I take those notes and then I work on them.
Okay.
So I don't know what you want me to say in response to that. Like, okay, I'm listening and I'm saying, okay,
All right.
all right.
Can I tell one joke?
Sure, you want to tell one joke?
So I, to investigate this, I watched a video about foreplay to learn how to do it better, and it was really good, except for the boring part at the beginning that I had to skip over.
I'm like, what did you watch? Okay, it was just a joke. It was
It's
just
a
joke.
one-liner, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So then we have the next section here. I called it the no holds barred. Ask your partner anything that's been on your mind. Did you write down any questions for this section?
Well, I had like notes about maintenance sex and if like that was offensive to you or what you thought about that. But I have this question that's kind of, I would say, real. What hinders our sex life, and how do we need to work around that?
Oh, okay. That's deep.
That's deep, and so you can just, if you're not ready to answer it, but it's just a thoughtful question, like what does hinder it?
What
And
hinders it?
I don't think we have a bad one, but
Well, no.
how could we take it from good to great?
Talking about it. I think talking about it.
Okay. And me not being a prude when you bring it up and having my shoulders go up and recoiling.
Right.
Note to self. Okay.
Right. But I think so. It's about how we approach talking about it. So for now, we'll build it into our Mondays and maybe have a little bit more of a intention with saying, hey, like this is something I want to talk about. Can we do it now? Can we do it later?
Okay.
Right.
Agreed. All right, what's in your, gosh, you're making it seem like you have all these burning questions here.
I have a few. I'll just throw them out there. Okay. More for fun than anything else. Right. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important would you say sex is to your overall life, personally?
I don't think you'll like the answer to that question.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
I feel like it's pretty low.
What number would you give
I don't know. 5?
it? Okay. It's better than I thought.
0?
Okay.
Only be like, I don't know. I feel like life gets in the way of a lot. Like right before kids and everything, there was just us, right? So it's like different. So like we're kind of like shifting through this child rearing, raising kids. We have a junior higher almost. Like it's like this odd whatever. And we never really lose each other in it. But I think there are times where we go from like hot and heavy to like a little less than we'd like.
Right.
So it'd be good just to be kind of a little bit more consistent, or even so much so that you'd say that you don't want any.
Right. That would be a good goal to have. Be like, you know what? I'm actually good for now.
I'm good.
Check tomorrow, but actually I'm good.
I'm fine now.
Yeah. All right. So follow-up question. I revealed to you the percentage each day that I probably am estimating that I dedicate to thinking about sex. What percentage would you say you think about it on your typical day?
Do you want the real answer?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Like 2%.
Okay. All right. That's a little lower than I expected, but it's okay. It's good we're getting out there. Okay. This one's for fun. I don't even know why I'm asking it. But are you familiar with what a hall pass is?
Yeah, isn't that like if this person?
Yeah, so who's your celebrity hall pass?
I don't think I have one.
Okay.
I used to be into like celebrities and all that like in my 20s, but like now I feel like I'm like so far out of that. Like,
Yeah. I guess a lot of people, my answer would be the same. And so people are listening and be like, you guys are so lame. Like everybody hit. It never really crosses my mind.
you know what? And I think there was a time, especially when we were younger, right? Like, because we were married young and all that, like, be like, oh, this person, oh yeah. But like, and maybe it does sound lame. Like, I do love you so freaking much. Like, and I might like acknowledge like this person is witty or that person is like attractive.
Right. There's
like,
attractive qualities in other people.
That you've like make you like laugh or smile or like you're like drawn to. But like when I think about sex and about anybody else, like, no, thank you.
Well, for me, I would say I think we think of it as a physical thing, and I think that's secondary. I think for me, at least, the primary function is psychological. Right, it's mental, and you can't just fabricate that with anybody. So that's why I can't think of anybody else, because with you, you're the one that I have that connection with, that actually like satisfies that need.
Yeah, and I would hope that to be true, but I would be like, oh, if this person walked in, like, yeah, you go ahead.
Oh, all right.
I feel like I'm too like, what's the word, like protective? Like, you're mine. Like, sorry.
All right.
I think I would beat whoever that was up. I like you that much.
Okay.
Which is,
All right, well, I just threw the question out there.
Why, do you have one? You say no?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Right.
So, all right, so you'll laugh at this one. This is my final question. Just so everyone knows, we started dating when we were 15. We got married at 23, and we waited to have sex until we were married. It's like our wedding night was night number 1. So, Rosanna, like now knowing, like having that experience prior to being married, and then having been married for almost 15 years now, if you could go back to our pre-marriage phase of the relationship, would you wait again until we were married?
So that's a good question. I think there's a lot there to answer, because I think in a lot of ways, like who I was, like obviously when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, like I think there's a lot that goes into having sex, and part of that is like giving a piece of yourself away, okay, so to speak. And so to have left that with someone, right, that wouldn't have been you. Like I'm like so like loyal and so like.
No, I'm talking about like.
I know, but
us.
it's you. I know, but it's you. But like I don't know that I would have been ready. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that we got married like young, it's not like, I think it's a different story if you don't get married until you're 40.
Right.
But we were young, and so like
we were pretty committed from early on, and
correct, and
decided that from early on.
Oh yeah, and I was super hot for you, and you were super hot for me, and there were times that it was hard to keep our hands off each other. Like, God bless being a teenager. I wish that was kind of still a problem. like in some ways, you know what I mean?
Right. Me too.
But, I don't know if I would have been ready earlier. Maybe like by the time we were in or out of college. But I think like had we done something like that in high school, I think it would have ruined a few things for me.
Okay.
Maybe.
It's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think from my standpoint too, having that been the only way we really experienced the trajectory of our relationship, I don't regret it.
I know, but sometimes now when we're in bed together or whatever, I'm like, don't you feel like we wasted so many years not doing this? Like this is, I mean, it's nice.
I don't know. We were playing the long game.
We were playing the long game. Mm-hmm. Training. Life is a marathon, not a race, right? Or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not a sprint. I don't know.
Not a quickie. Okay. How do you
That was one
wrap
of your
this up?
questions. Quickies or marathon?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Thoughts?
that was one of my questions. Quickies. I mean, I like both. It's all about variety. But if I had to choose,
Oh, I didn't think you would say that because you're like the more like kind of romantic-y, like
yeah, but
ideal
sometimes
one.
it's just kind of like, you know what, I want this now, and then I'm going to move on.
All right, there you go. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, how do you want to end this? I mean, we've talked about a lot. We did like kind of like a little precursor in the beginning and then kind of did our questionnaire, which I don't even know that anybody is going to listen to this episode. But if we had some takeaways, I think there are some really good takeaways. And I think the first is that you have to communicate, right? When we're talking about sex and marriage, relationships, you have to communicate your wants, your needs, your insecurities. Like you have to talk about all of that because otherwise, like you're not putting things into context and people will not understand where you're at.
Right.
I think the second thing that's pretty important is to share desires and expectations. And I think when we were younger, that was harder to do. Maybe not knowing that that's like a part of it.
Right.
And so sometimes when you would share your expectations with me that I wasn't already meeting, I would get defensive and feel guilty. Instead of just like knowing that I needed to listen and then like try or like, you know what I mean? Try and figure that out. So communicate, share desires and expectations, and then like make a plan, right? Like, so if we talked about this and like, the number is 4, 12 or whatever it is for the week, right? Like
12 times a week.
Right? Make a plan. Why are you laughing? You wish, right? Initiate. Don't just expect that someone's always going to volunteer,
Okay.
right? But initiate. You want it? Initiate it. And do your homework. Know what your partner likes, know what they don't like, what kills it for you.
Not just knowing, but then actually acting upon it too, which requires a little bit more effort. Or obviously, if it's not the same as if what you like or what turns you on is different than what I have any sort of interest in, like it takes a little bit of extra effort to actually make that happen, but it's worth it.
Yeah. This is one thing we didn't talk about, but I saw this come up when I was just kind of reading about the topic, is to take care of yourself, like physically, right? Like No one wants to be in front of somebody else and feel ashamed about like who they are or what they look like or their insecurities. Do I have insecurities about my body? I sure do. I always have. But like having had 4 kids, right? Like I've gained and lost weight like multiple times. Like right after I had a baby, I was uncomfortable with my body. And so when I was uncomfortable with my body, it was hard to share my body with you. And so there were barriers a lot of times before, after, and during kids because of that. And so like if you want to have a healthy marriage and a healthy sex life, right? Like you have to take care of your body. And so that's a little bit different for everybody, but I think that's part of it and it's important. Avoid comparison, right? Like our 3 days a week is maybe, not the same as your 1 day a week or your 9 days a week. Like everybody's normal is a little bit different. And so like, although you can talk about it with friends or ask opinions or whatever, like you have to do what's right for you in your relationship.
Yeah. All right, I have a final question, and that is like, do you feel like we said at the beginning, like this is not common conversation with friends or with family. In your opinion, do you think it should be?
And I think it depends on the type of friends that you have.
Right? Do you just bring it up with like, oh, by the way, I was thinking. I think that's awkward to bring up with anybody. Yeah.
I don't think that.
But if somebody brought it up with me, I would be interested in talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think you have to talk specifics with people. Like nobody needs to know like to the T what's going on. But like you could talk about like, I feel like, we're not having as much sex as we used to. Like, did you ever feel like there were points in your marriage that like it was like more or less, or like, like what got you out of it? Like, I think that's healthy. And if you have like those people in your life, right? We talked about my person, my people, that it's an intimate group that knows you and knows your intentions and knows your values. Like, they're going to respect a conversation about that. And it's, not to be nosy or not to. So I think you have to know who are the people that you can go to talk about that.
Yeah, right. All good thoughts. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this bonus conversation that we're sharing with you. This wraps up season 3. So as has been our custom, at the end of any given season, we're going to go off the air for the next several weeks, but we'll be back live with you in June with the beginning of season 4.
Thanks for joining us this season, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are 2 great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.